Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Ida Cutler. I am a bookseller at Women and Children First, one of the last feminist bookstores in the United States, located in Chicago, Illinois. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to move this. Before every event, we acknowledge that the land that Women and Children First is situated on is the land of several tribal nations, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Odawa, the Sac, Fox, Miamia, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee. We recognize these nations as the traditional occupants of the land and its importance for the 65,000 indigenous peoples living there today. Furthermore, it is in Women and Children First mission to use books as tools for liberation and amplify underrepresented voices. With this land acknowledgement, we recognize the importance of providing books that include information on the ongoing legacies of Indigenous peoples, their dispossession, and the white settler colonialism that our store has benefited from. Tonight, it is my honor to be hosting the virtual launch and celebration of the book. I moved it out of the way, but now I'm bringing it all back. Zigzags by Kamala Puligandla. Yay. If we were all in person, likely we would be, after this event, eating a cake from Dinkle's Bakery that has like a picture of this book on the sheet cake. And I just bring up Dinkles because I feel like this book is rich with so many Chicago references and shout outs to stores. And while Dinkles is, maybe not the most relevant, I'm just trying to like set that vibe that we got going on. I've never had anything from Dinkles other than a cake with a book cover. So just to say, I'm going to tell you a little bit about these two lovely humans on screen with me. Kamala is a writer and editor in Los Angeles. She writes autobiographical fiction and essays on queer love and futures. Kamala is currently the communications and marketing director at the Women's Center for Creative Work. Her novella, You Can Vibe Me on My FemmePhone, was just released from Co-Conspirator Press this January. She is joined tonight by Ariel Mejia. Ari is a freelance audio artist and producer. Her work has been featured on Shortcuts from Falling Tree Productions, The Heart, and Antibody, a series from Jacobin's magazine, The Dig. Before we begin, okay, this is the housekeeping part. I just want to tell you, if you have yet to order this book, you can do so anytime by clicking the Buy the Book button underneath our faces right now. It's that teal button right there. It will take you to womenandchildrenfirst.com. We're currently offering curbside pickup and shipping and also limited capacity store hours if you would like to come in. You can learn more about other events that we have on that same website, in addition to more information about how to do the book shopping. During the event, there's going to be a Q&A at the end. Be sure to drop a question by using the Ask a Question button. It's right under that Buy the Book button. It says Ask a Question right there. Drop it in at any moment. And we'll get to the questions at the end of the event. That is all that I have to say. Without further ado, let's give it up for our wonderful Kamala and Ari.
Thank you for that intro. Hi, thanks for coming to this event. We are excited for this conversation. Ari and I have had like a couple of pre-conversations, so we're excited.
Definitely.
I think to kick us off, I think I'll just read a passage from the book. This is the book. If you haven't bought it, please buy it. If you've already bought it and you need another copy for somebody else, you could do that too. Today, I don't know, I'm like feeling really all the spring energy in LA right now, maybe like all over the place actually, but I'm going to be reading a passage sort of like midway through the book, and we're going to be following my main character, Aneesha, onto what is like, a hangout, but it's kind of a date with this girl that she's been like really into for a long time. And her name is Zoe. She also calls her tutor crush. And I'm like trying to think if there's anything else people need to know. I think that's it. I think we could just get into it. Okay. My grand idea today was that I'd bring these delectable sandwiches to Zoe and casually impress her. I'd never actually been on a date with a girl I knew and hadn't already slept with, so I didn't know how to tell whether I was over or underdoing the impressive. To ask if you did, I congratulated myself. And much to my relief, she replied, buttons, pencils, wool, tennis balls. As I left the shop, hot sandwiches tucked securely into my backpack, I did suddenly feel guilty. I was extending a Whitney tradition to Zoe, which seemed an affront to the both of them. But as I rode down Ardmore to pick up the bike path, I told myself that this was crazy. It was my little piece of Chicago to share with anyone I wanted, and right now I wanted to share it with Zoe. I rode along the lakeside path and was hopping off my bike when I saw Zoe crossing the street with hers. She was wearing a purple dress that looked to be made out of t-shirt material. It fluttered gently above her knees. I had always taken issue with her sunglasses, which implied the possibility of an impromptu extreme sports outing, but I forgave her the moment she took them off. Hers was an unfairly illuminating smile. Her whole face sparkled. She handed me her bike helmet and shook out her hair in a fashion that was equally beach babe and biker hunk. I'm super sweaty, she said. You still want a hug? I absolutely did. Do you not recall that part where I told you I was gross? I asked. Yeah, about that. She eyed me skeptically, even as she slipped an arm over my shoulder for a hug. You have to use industrial soap even if it dries your hands out. Have you heard of hepatitis A or the plague? I just know that vaccinating babies makes them autistic. Raw milk gives children superpowers, and you catch diseases from penises. That's like real public health, right? She laughed. This is sort of pertinent because of the whole thing with Julian. I pointed to a shady spot under a tree and we walked over. Oh, Julian. I wanted to know how her ex-boyfriend had fucked it up. Tell me what happened with that. I realized he was cheating on me because he gave me crabs. Crabs? That's gross, I said. She punched my shoulder so quickly I nearly caught my foot in my front spokes. That's not nice, Zoe said. Her glare was real, and I detected our nearness to her inner cliff, the one that certain women like to laugh about and dance around, but which everyone else was meant to take seriously. I had to admit that I liked this kind of jumpy, mercurial behavior. It was something that I admired and found fascinating, because the world rarely felt that close and immediate to me. I meant him, of course, not you. So what'd you do? Got rid of them, obviously, she scoffed. I chuckled. No, not with the crab, Zoe. I mean with Julian. It was a gorgeous summer day, overly saturated with color, and there were even tiny waves cresting on the lake. It was safe weather for a story with an unfortunate ending. I laid my bike down and spread out a blanket for us. Zoe sat down without any skirt holding and still managed not to show anything she didn't mean to. I was amazed by this elegant feminine gesture, and she acknowledged this with a sly smile. How thoughtful of you to bring a blanket, she said. Might you even call it impressive? I asked. Might you call this impressive? She lifted a large bottle of fin du monde from her backpack, and I clapped. When I unveiled the sandwiches, she stuck a victory fist into the air. Our picnic ideas mesh very well, I said. We ate messily while Zoe told me her breakup story. Julian, who was an immaculately dressed design student at the Art Institute, had been sleeping with Zoe's friend Hannah. Hannah had come to Zoe for advice on what to do when the guy you're sleeping with has given you crabs. Zoe, who had recently suffered the same fate and who knew Hannah was married, suddenly became suspicious. Wasn't that an outrageously stupid thing for her to bring up? Zoe asked me. To someone whose boyfriend you're fucking? She threw her hands in the air. When Zoe confronted Julian, he admitted that he and Hannah were secretly arranging her divorce so the two of them could run away together. I thought you and Julian moving to Portland, I said. Yeah, me too. I was getting a new teaching certificate and everything. Also, we could be near his family. Wow, I said, Julian. Far more surprising than I imagined. Her face was scrunched up. I've never felt like such an idiot. I know this is going to sound terrible, I heard myself saying, and then stopped. I recalled from the previous night that what people in post-breakup mode needed from me was to be heard and acknowledged, not to be reminded of our collective doom. Oh, never mind, I said, as Zoe put down her sandwich. Come on, she shook her head. Now you have to say it. I'm too curious. I winced and took a sip of my beer. Aneesha, share your thoughts with me. Otherwise, there's no point in telling this whole thing to you. She ate a pickle off the butcher paper in front of me, and I liked how easy it was with her. I was thinking, I said, isn't it kind of a relief to know that even people like Julian, who are so regimented and together, even they have an insatiable desire to suddenly drive off in a car headed who knows where, windows down, hair blowing in the wind? I mean, and this might sound terrible, but aren't you sort of impressed with him for being so moved and ballsy to follow through on a plan so immensely ill-fated? Zoe was staring at me. She was deciding whether or not she hated me for offering this challenge instead of my sympathy, which is not an excuse for his hurtful, deceitful behavior, I added. There's just something hopeful about people, well, still being able to surprise you. It's a reminder that if we're all still alive and festering and capable of anything, even if I paused and put my hand out. Zoe grabbed it and squeezed my fingers in her fist. He doesn't deserve to have you on his side. I'm not on his side, I assured her. My fingers were turning white in her hand. I'm just trying to find something else for you to feel besides stupid. Something positive and resonant, with a brassy splash of absurdity for humor's sake. Her smile made an appearance again, and she scooted over so we were shoulder to shoulder, staring out at the lake. You're very mean, sweet. It's strangely personal. I'm sorry. I started to crush our sandwich papers into balls. What I intended to say was, that Julian, what a crummy bastard, must have been a real knucklehead to lose a precious broad such as yourself, Saul. How about that? Now listen here, she continued, in the 1940s Hollywood speak I had apparently been using. That bum was a lying, cheating bastard, and I deserve better. Someone who knows how to treat a lady. This would be the part of the movie, I said, returning to my own voice, where the golden gentleman, who apparently has very high morals, still finds it totally fine to mac on a woman because she's having a moment of crisis, which is his main opportunity to give her a stiff, forceful kiss. Zoe was laughing. Speaking of which, I thought about what you said last time when you ran off in a huff. I looked away, feeling sheepish about what should not have been such a dramatic moment. I'm no longer in a moment of crisis. You're just going to have to trust me on that, she said. Her perfect chestnut hair waved in a lively arc across her forehead, and instead of the riot of excitement I expected, there was a calm opening up inside of me. Anyway, I think you should come over later, she said. Are you inviting me over for sex? I asked, and what I hoped came off as a teasing question and not the clarification it was. Her eyebrows shot up at a sharp angle. I'm sorry, were you hoping for more, like sex and popcorn, maybe? I laughed then, at myself mostly, but also at her for liking me, and my mixed signals, and my overinflated heart, which at times hung so close to my face it blocked my vision. You know what? You're pretty awesome, I said. I turned my head to the side so I could smell her hair, a cinnamon apricotish waft, for Richard and me, because that's what always got us. She turned her head and rested her chin on my shoulder. Thanks. Ditto. Now, tell me something about you that is not about other people, just you. What are you curious about? I asked her. When did you do this? She asked, running her hand along the side of my head. That is going to take a while, because when you ask about my hair, you're asking for the overwrought story of my queer coming of age, I warned Zoe. She laughed and lay down on her stomach, which is all I wanted to hear anyway. It all began on a warm day in San Diego, I started, when I was visiting my friend Darren. He just finished his finals. I just finished a 2-day marathon of Firefly in his living room, as well as the last of his macaroni and cheese. We challenged each other to go to the barber shop right then to kick off the summer with mohawks. To my great relief, Zoe didn't make me tell the complete linear story, which would have ended, as all my most honest attempts did, in overcompensating lies. Zoe chimed in and told me that she had shaved her head once, right before a big marching band performance, much to the shock and horror of her family and her school. It was a little extreme, a little too obviously a call for attention, she said bashfully. But I was serious about it. And when people asked me why I'd done it, I'd shrug and go, why not? Or, this is so embarrassing. She squeezed my arm and winced. I'd just say, feminism. She gave me a cold, hard stare, and I fell over laughing. I know. It's hard to argue with feminism, I said. Well, that's what I was banking on. We took our time getting home, and when we arrived at Zoe's building, the sun had begun to set. I followed her into the echoey apartment, and once I closed the door, it was nearly dark inside. I reached out to find my way in this unfamiliar space and found her back. She turned swiftly into me, and we unleashed the sort of greedy kissing that revealed how much we'd been pretending not to think about each other. So, she paused. Before I get ahead of myself, you're not just going to run out in the middle of this, are you? She threw a smirk at me. Hey, I'm sorry about that, I said. I have this terrible affliction where I live most vividly in my head. I honestly just needed a little time to fantasize about you in a realistic way. Zoe considered this for a second. Okay, so she ran a finger over her lips. What happens first? Well, this, I said, and then I motioned to her couch. You're sitting over there at your computer and you're having trouble with your internet connection. That is your fantasy? She asked. Internet trouble? Yeah, well, that's the beginning anyway. I told you. I like to keep it reality based and in the realm of my abilities. What? I asked. Nothing. Zoe smiled and went over to the couch. She picked up her laptop and banged around on the keys. Woo! I am having a really hard time downloading these important security documents. She paused and looked at me. Wait, are we reenacting a Mariah Carey video? Do you have water guns? I asked excitedly. It was a treat to spend the night with her. She was confident and silly, and there was no hesitancy. I had forgotten how the small things could floor me. The luxury of her hair sweeping against my body, the slightly bitter taste of her ear, or that serious shift when we were suddenly hurtling toward an orgasm, and I knew I better not stop exactly what I was doing. She needed me awake the next morning, saying, Surprise, I wake up early. So I got up and we went for coffee at M. Henry. I knew the guy at the counter who threw in some pastries for free, and we sat outside and made up dumb names for the baby strollers that went by. Well, if you find any crabs, you know who to blame, she said when I gathered my things to leave. Her lightness relieved me, and I bounded down the steps, waving at her as I went. I had been renewed. On my ride home, I sucked the air of a new day up through my nose. There was some music blowing out of an open car window at a stop sign, and I gave the guys inside an open mouth thumbs up as I flew by. I was comforted to know that I could be moved like this, in a moderate way that was all zings and citrus bursts, and not something dark and horrible, like the Great Molasses Flood of 1919. I didn't know why it was my point of comparison, but it seemed to embody the sense of imminent doom I usually felt at the possibility of genuine romance. That I was standing in a cobbled street, living my life, when a molasses tank burst, and all I could do was stand there, watching the sticky black waves of death come oozing slowly at me. But this wasn't that, not even close. Not even a little, not even at all, I sang cheerily, which did then seem like I was taunting death and while on a bicycle, so I decided to whistle instead. Okay, that's the end of that.
Thank you for reading that. What a pleasure that was. And I do love that part. I'm just living in that date. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Well, I guess there was a few different places I wanted to start, but now I kind of want to throw those out the window and just go into how I'm feeling.
Let's go. Let's go off script.
Kind of what kept me. I mean, along other than like beautiful, gentle, the eroticism and the desire that is throughout it, not inherent, not necessarily sexual, but for summer, for heat, for friends. but your relationship to detail throughout the book, I just was continuously fascinated by, and yeah, it just kind of I'm gonna like loosely read
read the
my
question.
question to you. That and also just like I was like as you're reading, I'm like the pickle on the butcher paper and like the way she sits and looks and just like yeah. That so your details are magnificent to me. That's something that I just particularly love
Thank you.
in your writing all around. The way that you're saying things and what exists between them, you know, and the most like gentle and delicate feelings are so deeply shown. And as you know, and people in here, or how Ida just said, like I'm an audio producer telling stories in radio, and audio stories is particular about like always like show. And I think in writing, the kind of how like your storytelling, like trying to pull away from the telling versus showing, and I just feel like you do that so well. And this isn't really like a queer question, but I just was curious about, as a writer, like your attention to detail, and I like to hear you talk about how you nurtured the details of this story.
That's a really great question. I think that there are all these rules they tell you when you first start writing, and show not tell is one of them. And I think that there's like, I don't know, I guess there are times and places when I think that telling is actually better. Um, and so I do try to mix it up a little bit. I think in this particular scene, there's like a good amount of showing, and I like to use dialogue as a way of showing, and then you can sort of like juxtapose the things people are saying with their actions, and there's like a lot of tension usually like between that. And I think particularly on date scenes or people are flirting or getting to know each other, there's a lot of things that you can notice that a person is definitely not going to say, and that is the stuff that I really like. And I guess like my relationship to detail is that like I'm a person who remembers a lot about things, and I'm observing very carefully all the time. I think sometimes to the chagrin of the people who are being watched. And I like to remember lots of details, both because I think that those are where like some people's personalities live, and I think you can say a lot with like a small gesture in like the right moment. So I don't know, I really like to include those things in dialogue, but I also just remember that stuff. So like that's how I'm going to remember, like if we like hang out together, I'll remember like the texture of the dirt and like what the sky looked like, and like how someone's mouth moves when they talk. And like I don't know, I was in a different interview where someone was like, that seems like the gayest part about your work. And I was like, I think it is. I think like the deep observation of how everyone is moving all the time is like super queer and gay. So I'm glad that you caught on to that.
I agree, and that really resonates. Which, okay, so I'm gonna just like scale back a little. You know, I want to talk about the world of this book. I think in particular, like how we came to be talking about this. Like, yeah, we have mutual friends. We've met a couple times, but pre-COVID world, you're like coming through Chicago, and I'm really excited to come to Chicago with this book. I don't know, like, and then, reading it and being a lifelong Chicagoan, but for a lot of people, it doesn't take long to feel like a Chicagoan. And I think that's also kind of what you get at here too. And I don't know, like, talk to us about the role of Chicago and just like Aneesha and you. I kind of want you to merge my other question, which is like the docu fiction of this.
Okay. That's okay. I think my relationship to Chicago has always been like, it's like an edge. It's like an on the edge. It's like cuspy. Like I definitely don't call myself a Chicagoan. I lived there like for a year, and then lived there for like several summers. And I don't think that it all showed me like the whole city or like all the city or like anything. But I was definitely like, I like living very deeply in the places where I'm living. And this book captures a time in my life in my 20s where I moved around a lot, and I was like severely underemployed. So I spent a lot of time going to see like everything cool about the city, and people could invite me to like a party like an hour and a half away, and I would not think twice, be like, yep, I'm going, even if it starts at like 1 a.m. Like I'll just like ride my bike there, or like I'll take the train for like 2 hours and I'm gonna go. So I do feel like with that attitude, I was able to meet like a lot of really interesting people, and people showed me their own corners of Chicago, and it's a very neighborhoody city. So I got to see like, you know, everyone's little corner that they love, which I thought that was really special. And that's kind of what I wanted to put in the book, is I think in so many ways, like people who were in my life for real showed me like little pieces of Chicago that felt like I could share them with them. And that felt really special to me, because I think that I had lived in a lot of places, but maybe not ones where people had built like what I would call a home for themselves and a community for themselves. And that I was like allowed and invited in felt like really special at that time in my life. So that's kind of where like a lot of the book came from originally. Um, in terms of like, I know that Ari had asked a question about like what is real? Like, are we talking to Aneesha? And
Well, I
I
also want
think
to
that,
interject, because when we
yeah,
we
go
like
ahead.
pre-interviewed about this, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm like talking to like a celebrity, like I'm talking to the character of the person I'm reading, and that feels quite romantic and exciting. And then I'm like, well, whatever. I don't even know how much of this is actually you. And you were like, no, it is. This is her. This is Aneesha. And I was like, well, I don't know. You know, it's just fun. I hope everyone here is kind of feeling that. If you've read this book, or when you read it, you can like, I don't know. It's just such a fun part of meeting a character in a book. Anyway, sorry.
I
Please go
do.
on.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I do think that Aneesha is like totally who I was when I was 25, and that's what I wrote from. And it's been a journey, because obviously it's been many years since I was 25. I just turned 36, so I'm like, that's a while ago now. So it is me, but it's like, you know, the inner layer I've like matured, I hope, in some ways. And so I don't feel like it's exactly me. And then for everyone else in the book, I'm like, I think that these are just takes that of like my takes on like one way to look at a person, or one way to look at a character. And I've borrowed things from like people's lives who I knew and hung out with. But it is also the things that I put in there, and this goes back to the detail question. Like everything I put in there is to like serve a particular purpose, right? So like every character is there to like serve a really particular part in like my protagonist's journey, which sounds really selfish to say out loud. But it's true. And I think like when we think about our lives, like each of us individually, and like how we grow up, and like who was important to like, you know, each of the different things we learned about ourselves, like that was something I was thinking about when I was like turning real life experiences into a novel.
Yeah, so many curiosities came up for me about these people and about this world, and then I picked this up, and knowing you, and I'm like, cool, oh my god, I'm gonna get like this gay love story. Yes, here I go. And then about halfway through, I'm like, oh, Anisha's kind of the only like one of there's a lot of characters in this book, y'all. There's a lot of characters. And Aneesha is one of like a very small handful of queer characters that I am told is queer. And so that I continuously like had to keep checking myself as a dyke and somebody who loves like all queer worlds. And I'm like, oh, wait, am I reading like this straight book? But clearly not. But, you know, I found myself being like, where are the fucking homos here or something, you know? And then I'm like, wait, they're right here. And I think that kind of led me to want to ask you about like, and same thing, and not just sexuality, but gender too, race. I mean, things kind of did seem to flesh out, but we were never explicitly told, right? And so they were pretty muddy throughout the book. I was left guessing, and I was just kind of wanted to ask you about that and that decision in particular, like to be explicit or not. And also like, how does this tie into the fact that this maybe wasn't a queer community, but these are straight people that were situated in a very queer story? Sorry, it's like roundabout, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, yes, I think there's a couple of questions in there. I really like starting with where are the homos of this book? Like, I think that that was a question that I was asking myself about like the world at the time, and like it wasn't like I didn't know where the homos were. Like, I went to college with like a whole bunch of gay people, and we had a fabulous time together. I think it was sort of like I wasn't really sure how to be like an adult queer. Like everyone that I knew who was queer was like the same age as me, and at that time it was like mid to early 20s, and I think that not to say that like I was in this friend group to like learn how to grow up or like be an adult, but I was like, oh, there are so many more ways to live and be a person than like I was, previously aware of. And at this time, I think it was whatever this group that I met at this bar was like really compelling to me because they seemed like people who also were looking for like other ways to live, which seemed queer to me at the time. And then like as like I think as the book goes on and also as my life went on, I was like, no, that's like not really what's happening here. Like everybody else is just like in their mid-20s and like fucking around, which I was too. But I think I was like, I'm gonna have like a lifetime of fucking around, so like I need to find like that area where people are doing that. And I did, and I do think that that is partially what this book is about. It's like it's about that phase where like I didn't quite know what I was looking for or quite what I wanted. I just knew that like I had these things that seemed fine outwardly, but like left me dissatisfied and wanting more. And I think also feeling really lonely in a way that I didn't fully understand. And I think that speaks to like the race thing you were talking about. I think like it does speak to how I was considering the openness of queer identity. I thought that all of these things like that's like two parts. So like on the one hand, at that time, I was like, oh, like I had never had like only people of color as friends. And since I had when I was like a kid, but not as like a queer adult, like trying to be a writer. And there's something about writing that was super white for a long time in my life. So that was like a huge part of it. But also, in addition to that, there was this whole other thing where I was writing a book, and I very specifically wanted to write a book that wasn't about my identity because I felt like it was like fucked up that in literature, like a person like me can't just like write a story about like exploring my life and having fun. That instead, I was like required to explain myself and like my existence. And that made me really mad. So I did explicitly write this book to not do that. And I think it captured a time in my life that now I'm like, oh, I do find things like missing in there that I wish that I wish that like I had them only because now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, like that's a missing piece of my identity that would have been maybe cooler to have in here. But also I just didn't. And I'm like, okay with that. Like, that's, I don't know. I think the ambiguity was something I liked and that, there was a piece of me that enjoyed people having to like decide. I think especially for people who are white, like I don't think they notice that it's ambiguous. And, I kind of find that interesting too.
No, I that's why I kind of kept checking myself and finding like my own kind of, I don't know, like internalized shit about like this is a gay book, right? But like I also am so thirsty for books that are just they're books and they just like happen to have these queer characters. This is just like a common motif as queers that make media, which also kind of reminds me of, this is where it's like when we were gearing up for this and I was like, how did you guys meet? And we're like, we'll save that. And we're like, it's actually not that romantic. We have mutual friends. And I was like, no, actually, I do remember meeting you at a feminist library, the feminist library at the Women's Center for Creative Work. And I like reached for a Roxanne gay book. And you're like, have you read that book? And I was like, I haven't, but it looks kind of good. It's her fiction. Anyways, and then I was getting like all your feelings about the book. But I say this because it feels full circle. And also it was like critical ass thoughts, which are wonderful. And I was like, I don't even know this person. But the point is that I remember seeing Roxanne Gay talk a little while ago about like this very thing about like, why do I have to be like a black, fat, dyke woman making this? And so I really appreciated that challenge. Like, I just want to say that. And once I kind of like sifted through that, I was just in really deeply like the pure magic of this story, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's I being critical is something that I definitely like do as a pastime. So
Same,
that's just like
same.
part of me in the world. But I do remember that, and I remember being like, "Oh, did I say too much?" I don't know. I guess that I think that like I don't know. I feel two ways about the issue. Like on the one hand, I'm like, why can't I find a way to both like do like very significantly and deeply talk about my identity, but also in a way that isn't like the whole story, right? Like there has to be that way. But I do, and I think that I'm like as I write more, that is something I'm developing. But I think at the time that I wrote this, it was, I was younger and I was like reacting to everyone expecting something with like a name like mine on it to explain myself. So I relate to Roxane Gay. I also think that, some of her writing is great and some of it could be edited a little bit better.
Uh-huh. Oh, I know. I wanted to remind folks, like, I've got more questions, but if you have questions, please put them in the Ask a Question tab here that I'm like obsessed with, that people can just do. This is like a cool format. Oh, awesome. Ida said it at the same time as me. Thanks, Ida. So okay, like that's so what we're talking about, like I didn't know what I needed, what I was really looking for yet at this time in my life, and like in particular to community, I think. And we had, we talked about this, and just being like also the point of this, like the other side of the coin is like making queer media because it's about feeling seen, being seen. And I do, yeah. So I'm curious about, what did writing this like purge for you, if anything? I think all art making is in the name of healing personally. So I just, what did that mean for you? And if it didn't, I want to hear about that too.
I think it purged a lot of things because I wrote this over the course of some like pretty transitional years in my life. So I think one of them, there's a number of things. On the romantic front, I think it was like me like writing and then like getting over this like dynamic or this narrative that like really I had created, where like I wasn't attractive enough, or like people weren't interested in me. And I like at the time of writing this like knew that was false, but then also like didn't feel like I was like super lovable also to the people that I wanted to be. So part of writing this was about like writing all those feelings, and like in these sort of like different kinds of scenarios. And like eventually, like I think the writing it was like I was like, oh, this is kind of stupid that I felt this way, because like look at all those interactions that you remember, that you recall, that like you've had incidences like these that show that like this idea isn't true, and it's like kind of you perpetuating it on some level. So that was part of it. I also think romantically, I realized writing this book that I was like, I was pursuing like people who were unavailable in so many different ways, which was something I'd been doing for a long time, and is still something I like on some level. But I like now I'm like aware of that, so that was something that came out of the book.
Well, you can make masochism like work for you. That's part of being a healthy adult, I thought.
Right. Yeah, totally. Like as an adult, you could be like, okay, here's the thing that I know that I'm into. But I just at the time that wasn't conscious. I was just like, I don't understand why these things don't keep working out. And it's like, oh, because like you're interested in people who are just not down, like, or they have other things going on that are more important. So that's a big part of it. And then I think the biggest part, actually, that I think is the main theme of the book for me, is that I had friends who were very meaningful to me who no longer like had that same meaning to me anymore. And I wanted to both celebrate the relationships that we had and also feel perfectly okay being like, I can't, like these relationships, I don't really want them anymore. Or like the things that I loved about them have changed, or I've changed, and I want to let them go. And that for me was like the biggest thing about writing this book. And I think I kind of learned about myself that is something that I had wanted to do for a long time, maybe had been doing, and that I wanted to do a little more gracefully, perhaps. I don't know if it can ever be done like that gracefully, but
I mean, I do.
I do.
I don't know. Like, I think like spoiler alert, I don't know, whatever, the conversation with the Whitney character at the end, which is like, I will, like, kind of like, I will always love you. You can let me go. You can let me stop loving you in this way so that I can find love. And it does feel quite, I think of my younger self so deeply of like, when you're when you want to love someone forever, but you know that there's really no way, or like what that really means. Like, it's so strange. I do feel like it's like a dimension straddling, which is my vibe, of like your future self is right there with you being like, these things don't actually last, but that doesn't change how badly you want it. And it doesn't change the truth in the moment of the truth of when you're saying it as a young person or any person that wants to love forever, So I think it's interesting you're saying like, I wrote this as a kind of like, as this is something that is not, it's a book about forever love. And we are talking about it's foreverness. Do you know what I mean? Do you feel like that?
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I feel like what's interesting is that in creating this, I mean, I feel like a lot of people feel this way who make things about love, especially, but also just like their lives. It's like in creating this book, I created this other world in which the love is forever. And like, it doesn't matter then whether it like actually is forever, like right now in like this reality. And so in this reality, I feel like totally fine being like, and our lives change, and we let each other go, and it doesn't really matter anymore, and it's okay, we'll be fine. Because there is this other world in which I like, like wrote a lot about that love, and it continues in that book forever.
Oh, I love that. That gives me hope.
I know. I also, but like, I do also like, a lot of it is like the precipice of like big friend breakups that I had to have later. Like that's what this book was about too. And so there is a piece about it that I'm like, there's a lot of love that isn't forever, but it's really good at the time. It's meaningful at the time.
Totally. And like how romantic friendship is illustrated in this book, again, without the explicitity around it, which I think I see a lot more in like kind of like a queer consciousness nowadays that is about romantic friendship and like this emphasis and this and like naming that, like which I love. And like those are things that have been realities for a lot of us our whole lives. And how it gets really articulated in this book is so profound and consistent throughout it. I'm just looking at I'm looking at this, reading the messages in here. Okay, well
also
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, I agree, and like, thank you. And we also have 2 questions, and I specifically want to hear the one for you. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
Oh, sorry, my computer's been there. Let's see. For me, this one, as someone who is, read it, I guess. Here I go. As someone who's born and raised in Chicago, what is your experience reading this? I'm curious about what felt familiar to you and also what memories of your own brought up as a queer navigating the city. I mean, it was immediate. Okay, so I guess anyone from anywhere has mad pride, and I can only speak from my experience, but Chicagoans are like, we are the best. This is the best city in America. Like we got it all. Like, Chicago's the shit. And that energy was like immediate because this person was just trying to get back to Chicago and wanting to be in Chicago and like drawn to Chicago. And I was like, duh. So I like,
and you're like, same. It's the best.
Yeah, like Chicago is just as rich as a place like New York, but you can actually afford it. You don't got to work too hard. I got a lot of feelings about why you should live in Chicago. That said, there was also something so particular. There's some scenes where they go to a queer dance party called Chance's Dances, which doesn't exist anymore. I think pretty enough, but like it kicked ass. And over time, I'm like, this place got kind of straight, and I don't know who I can hit on, and I don't know who I feel like safe kind of like go.
Really?
And in this story, totally, because you're like, it's like these people aren't here to hook up; they're here to dance with their queer friend maybe that brought them. And there's where Aneesha is bringing her straight friends to this dance party. So it was that really kind of hit home in a way that maybe you couldn't have even really fathomed in writing.
Pause though. I didn't bring straight friends to the queer dance party. That was just a Danny's.
Okay, but that was an off chances night though. That was off chances, and it was that.
Okay.
I'm just saying. So, whatever. The point being is like I just kind of want to shout that out, and how like true it felt. It felt true in a way that, along with like, also I just moved to Edgewater. Another thing I want to say, like this book takes place like in a particular neighborhood on the north side. A lot of scenes at the Heartland, which also a soft spot because Heartland has been sold and totally transformed by now for when this was written. Actually, I appreciated that too. You talked to, sorry, I could go on. I'm going to try to cut this off, but
you can go on.
What I was saying is, like very early on, you talk about JB Alberto's Pizza, and like my partner and I just like like found it, and then we told somebody like, "Do you know about JB?" And they're like, "Where have you been? We've been knowing about that place." And that's how it is in Chicago. Like you think you found something, and it's like everybody knows about that secret. So there was just a lot of those little hidden like tidbits. As I hope that answers your question. Oh, as a young queer, well, and I guess. I don't know. I feel like I already just talked kind of long, but this story was someone in their mid-20s. Like in my mid-20s, my life, I had come away. Like I just I'd had a pretty like turbulent queer youth, and being like a young person with no nuance, like it's this or it's that. I was like, I don't want to be gay because that hurt, and I hated that. That person treated me like shit. Maybe I should just get a boyfriend and I'll be like happy. Which I was fine, but I was still very gay. So yeah. I wasn't really like deep in like a queer world in my 20s. So I just say like my queer youth was like hanging out at the Belmont Rocks and like getting fucked up in the streets in Boys Town because we felt like it was the only place we could be. And that's a very different tale than this book. Yeah.
That's true. That is a very different tale. But I also love that. And I think that like, yeah, you just saying like, I feel like everyone has such a journey through, I talked about this briefly, but like everyone has a journey through their own queer identity, but then there's also a journey through your own queer community. And they're like sometimes like on different timelines. And I do think that there were periods of my life like this book where like I wasn't like, queer community wasn't like number one on my mind all the time, which is weird to think about now where I'm like, that's like kind of like the main jam that I have. So yeah, it's funny to think about the differences. And like, I'm now imagining that like, of course, like a Chicago from your different age like ranges is like completely different based on that.
Totally. And I think, shoot, you said something and the thought went so fast through my mind. I can't, never mind, it's gone. Don't you hate that? Let's see, is there, okay, I think this is for you, Kamala. How do you think Zigzags would be different if you were to start writing it now, as opposed to a few years ago?
Wow. Good question, Michael. I don't know that it would be that different, actually. I like tried really hard to adhere to the mindset that I was in when I was 25. And I think that's the reason why the story works. So I think if I wrote it again, I might be a little more like, I might have more insight on the character, but her like naivete is like something I wrote into the world. And I think I would probably keep it that way, like now too. I think maybe I would like, I don't know, now that I've read it so many times, I'm like, I would edit some scenes, edit some things out of there, and maybe put a little more like sex in there. But that's just like what I don't know. I think for the most part, it would be pretty similar.
I remember more taco sex. Yes, please. What a great scene. What a great scene. I think that, like part of the story and that also was between the lines and talking about like find like the journey into around and in queer community of like what we're fed as what that means. And I really actually, it was so brief, but it was so poignant. The little paragraph that's like, the dykes I met, the queers I met, that wasn't me. So I didn't belong. And that was it. That was it. And I was like, wow, I don't, and I think I've had the privilege of being from Chicago, where there's all different pockets of like queer scenes and queer shit going on here. And like being at the high school that I went to, just like, which is when I was like a hardcore baby dyke as a teenager. Like, I just think that like there was something here that was being told that we were learning about your character and you about just like, well, that wasn't for me. So this chosen family was still my chosen family, yeah.
I think I didn't realize till, well, I don't even know that it's not even like realized. Like I grew up in the Bay Area and I like knew about queer people and pockets of queer people and queer culture. I think I just didn't know how like I was gonna fit into it. And I think that there are also things I just didn't understand about how a lot of queer community was functioning. Um, but I don't know. I think that I think there's like the interplay with that too, is that like I didn't really want to be, I just like, I don't know, like I was like, oh, I could hang out with like sports dykes. That's like people that I knew. And I was like, no, this is like really not my scene. Like that, I'm not into that. And then there are all these other kinds of like mainstream lesbian culture that also like I just wasn't that into, that I didn't really get. And I didn't really think to be like, oh, well, there have to, like, obviously that's like just like a culture of queer culture. There are many others of them. And I think I'd always met like individual queer people that I really like got along with and like really connected with, and had never really thought that like, I don't know. This is just like I'm like, I don't even really know what I was thinking, because like I definitely had like a solid queer friend groups and like including people of color like in college. Somehow after college, I was just like, I don't know, let's see what else there is. But I do like the idea that like, I don't know, there's so many things that you can discover about yourself that you don't know. And that particular section felt really like who I was at that time, where I was like, I have like mixed Asian ethnicities, so like I don't fit into any cultures, and like I don't fit in with like other dykes, and like I'm not like other writers I know. And that was like my thing at that time. And now I'm like, yeah, those are things are all true, but it doesn't mean you can't be connected to people anyway.
Yeah. So that, yeah, that kind of makes me think of like how um were those things, and so as you moved through your other works and things you've written after this, like how did that confrontation in this book affect and move you into the other things you wrote after that? What did writing this do for kind of the landscape or the trajectory of your writing, and what's your writing like these days? Because you said you wrote this a long time ago.
That's a really good question. I think it was like laying the groundwork for what I think of now as like my voice, or like my style. And it's a little tamer, I think, than I write now. I think I'm now very confident in like writing like super in my brain and like, super my perspective. And at this time I was like, oh, I have to like try and like invite people in and like make it more universal, and like people can like figure out what's going on. Now I'm like, I don't care about that at all. So I think that like it was the beginning of me writing about like me and things that mattered to me, which I also write about in the book. And after this I started writing a lot of short stories that were yeah, like very relationship and friend group based, and some of them have like surreal elements in them. The novella that I wrote that came out this January is like kind of a satire, kind of not. Also about a group of friends, but they're in LA and it's very queer. And it's also like based around this phone called a FemmePhone, which has a feminist operating system. And there's like weird, like, I don't know, I wouldn't call it, it's not like surreal even. It's like speculative fiction kind of about what this phone does and the relationship that it has with the characters. So I would say that it sort of like led me on this path to really just like be free to do what I want. And that's what I'm still doing. Like I was like, oh, now I can imagine like other worlds I'd want to live in. Like what is another friend group I might want to have? And I think it's also been like as I get older, I want to write about the experiences and things that I've learned about. So now I'm like, oh, like now that I'm like in my mid 30s, like what's that about? And what are questions that I have for like my queer future that I can answer by writing a book about my imaginary / real friends?
I love that. I mean, I really truly like, when you read a book that's like kind of, it is like watching a movie. Sometimes you read a book and you're like, it's like you're in the water, like you're like in the feeling, you're like, it's so central, which watching a movie can be like that too. I don't know. What I'm saying is that just like, I felt really, really transported by this book. And, as a Chicagoan, it was so comfy. There was like such a deep comfiness to it. But I think also as like a queer with so much desire inside me, like it felt comfy in that place too. Um, and yeah, I'm saying this to appeal to the people that are watching this. Like, I really recommend this book as kind of a way to connect with place and your body in a particular way. Yeah, I don't know, and maybe that's what you were going for, or maybe it wasn't, but it worked on me.
I know. It's like I don't think I intended those things, but they're certainly there, and I like that's cool. Like I love hearing that.
I was gonna ask you like a really basic writery question, which is like if there's a story or something you read recently that gripped your soul that you could recommend to us as people that like soul grippers, myself in
Oh,
particular.
gripped my soul. Okay, I'm like, what if I'm really bad at this because I read things and I give the book away and I forget that I read it. And like it'll live in my subconscious and come out someday and I'll be like, oh yeah, I read that. I just finished reading Miriam Gerba's Mean, which is poetry that is, I mean, like she's like great on Twitter and everywhere, but I feel like this book is like both soft and extremely hard, and I'm really into that. It took me a while to get into it, and then I was like, oh, I'm just gonna read the whole thing. So I liked that. I also just finished reading this book called Sarah Land by Sam Cohen, and it's also short stories. I guess not also poetry and short stories are different, but it's really, really good. And there are certain stories that I was like, whoa. There's one story about these two girls who are like sex workers in this like little boutique shop together. And that story was just rad. So I thought that was good. But I don't know, I'm like, what else? I don't know. I also read like glitch feminism that I really like. And there's just like a bunch of stuff. I don't know. I'm bad at this.
You're great. You did it. You did it. Yeah. Well, this was really fun. I'm obsessed, and I wish we could like do this forever.
I know. We'll have to pick another audience to do this for. Thanks, Ari. Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you for writing this and for asking me to talk to you today. Seriously.
Yes. I put on a sweater. I got a little chilly, but I'm still the same person here to tell you. Thank you all so much for this wonderful talk and the reading, and for writing this book. Oh my gosh. And I also love that the books you just mentioned are some of my favorites as well. That was cool to, feel. And everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much. And we hope that you have a great rest of your evening. Thanks for being here. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.